I'm delighted. I hope to be joined by everybody's favourite physicist, Brian Cox. Very good to see you, Brian.
Good to see you.
I just wanted to kick off, obviously, with what's been going on precisely where I am, Glasgow COP26. Have you been keeping an eye on it? I mean, how do you, as a proper scientist who's got very strong views on this, how do you assess the importance of what's going on here?
Well, actually, it's interesting to see the data you just presented, where you see that as our climate has become observably more unstable and extreme, then opinions have shifted. And I thought that was a very interesting set of data, because we now know, I think we're beginning to observe and experience what the climate models, have been telling us for a long time. The tragedy, in a way, is that if we'd acted earlier on what the models were telling us, then it would have been an easier process to mitigate the damage somewhat. But I was encouraged slightly by, again, some modelling, I think it was the University of Melbourne that was announced today or yesterday, that said, given the commitments from COP26, then we're looking at perhaps, at the moment, a 2-degree rise or 1.9. So I think there's the beginnings of some optimism. The problem can often be that the predictions are all doom and gloom. And I know that many in climate science feel that that is not the way to change public opinion. If you have a completely apocalyptic view and think there's nothing that can be done, then there is a real problem. So I'm cautiously optimistic that the needle is beginning to shift. And you saw that there in the data that you just presented.
Yes, no, I think that is completely right, and I completely accept the point that fatalism is the enemy of actual progress, as it were. Are you surprised? We've talked about public opinion, but are you surprised by the extent that political leaders, with only now a few exceptions, appear to get it?
I agree with the sense of your question. I think that it's been frustrating that for a long time there's been a disconnect between the scientific advice, which is coming out of the climate models, and the seriousness with which world leaders have approached the problem. But as you say now, I think it seems to me virtually unanimous that there is an issue that needs to be tackled. And so now I suppose the focus moves on to the very difficult question of what policy responses you can put in place, because that's not, of course, a scientific question. What science can do is give you a snapshot of our best understanding of the climate at any particular point. Our knowledge is imperfect, the models are imperfect, but it's very important to emphasise it's the best we can do. And I think now that's if there's one message I would want to give to politicians, or one thing I would like politicians to understand, is that we hear it with the pandemic as well. When people say follow the science, it's more complicated than that. But science is the best we can do at any given moment. And I think now it seems to me there's a broad understanding that the IPCC reports and the modelling that we have are to be followed, because we can't really do anything else.
No, absolutely right. Brian, I've got so much more I need to ask you. Please don't go away, you're at home, because, we've got somebody on the show who actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to science and climate change. Brian Cox, back with him in a minute or two. So I'm delighted that Brian Cox is still here. Brian, I want to go to you with, one of the smaller questions. You introduced actually this conference here, COP26, with a short film in which you said you believed that there was a very high probability that we are the only intelligent life in the Milky Way. You say we may be what gives meaning to the universe in a sense. When you saw all that stuff from the Pentagon not that long ago, talking about unexplained UFOs, did you just sort of dismiss that as not terribly significant? Well, the
evidence that Earth has been visited by intelligent beings at some point is extremely tenuous. I personally don't think there really is any. The point I was making in the COP video was that as far as we know, we've looked a bit. We've tried to listen for alien signals with the SETI program, but also from what we know from biology, it took, if you think about the Earth, it took the best part of 4 billion years to go from the origin of life to an intelligent civilization. That's an extremely long time, a third of the age of the universe. So I think when I speak to colleagues in biology and astronomy, the consensus is that intelligent life, even complex life, may be extremely rare indeed in a typical galaxy. And that's what I said at COP. I didn't say, it's not what I believe. It's just that I think I said that it is certainly possible that there are very few civilizations, perhaps one per galaxy on average. And I think that was the intention of that, was to focus the mind on the fact that if indeed we mess this up, if we diminish our civilization or eliminate our civilization, then it may be that we eliminate intelligent life in a galaxy of 400 billion stars. And I felt that was an important point to make.
Not a trivial point. Now, you're a big fan, however, of space travel, and I think you think it would be a good idea for Boris Johnson to go into space. What's your thinking there?
I was slightly misquoted as usual. What I said was that
Sorry.
I think if you look at the impact that seeing the Earth from space had on astronauts way back into the 1960s, so test pilots flying to the moon and so on, it was a profound impact. It made them think profoundly about the fragility of our planet and our responsibility towards it. And so my point was that now that space travel is relatively cheap and accessible, certainly relative to what it was in the 60s, it might be useful to send the people who are responsible for our world into space. These are 10-minute little jaunts into space to look down on the planet, because it may focus their minds. I did say, I did actually not only single out Boris, I said to Joe Biden and all the world leaders, and I also said that I wanted them brought back safely to Earth again. I did not say that I wanted them launched into space on a one-way trip.
No, I was aware of that, but I'm glad you cleared that up. Now, just very briefly, easiest question for last. We're talking here about the potential for climate catastrophe. Are we going to avoid catastrophe? And is the human species going to survive?
Well, look, I mean, I'm not a climate expert, I should say, but what I am is a scientist, and what that makes me do is pay attention to the experts. And the experts that I know say that we have a problem. We're committed to something like a 2-degree rise, which doesn't sound a lot, but is highly problematic in terms of agriculture in certain parts of the world, population movement, and so on. And we can mitigate those problems, both through policy mitigations and through aiming to reduce greenhouse emissions such that the peak temperature rise is within that range or perhaps lower. So it is our choice. There is no question that we can do it. And I'm getting more optimistic, as we said before the break. I'm getting more optimistic that people are now taking this as seriously as they should have done probably decades ago.
Fantastic. Well, you've cheered me up, which is, I'm sure, public service. Very good to see you. And come on again soon.